Hey friends, welcome to Flight Test. I'm Josh. Today we're going to be showing you how to build the twin engine version of the FT Legacy. This is going to give you great features like FPV capabilities, tons of power, and great stall characteristics. If you like that type of flying, this version's for you. If you want to build the trainer version, we have that wing version down in the link below. Let's get our materials in order and we'll get started. We're going to need our 3 main spar pieces. We're going to need our 2 main wing pieces. Now go ahead and all the other pieces keep aside because this is a very big build. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and weed out our spars. We're going to go ahead and carve out these cavities, making sure we don't go to the paper below. If you've already built the fuselage, which hopefully you have, this process is going to be very familiar for you. Your foam should look like this. Also note that we removed the 2 holes for our servo slots as well. Let's go ahead and focus on the smaller pieces first and we'll do our A-fold. An A-fold is where the side plate is above the bottom plate. So just think A above. We're going to take our hot glue gun with plenty of glue. We're going to focus that glue on the bottom of the side plate, stopping and starting about a ½ inch from the edge. We're going to rotate this up 90 degrees, and we're going to hold it for about 45 seconds. We're going to repeat the exact same process on the other side. Always make sure you place your glue where the glue is going to hold the most strength, where we're not just gluing the paper together, but the actual foam. We're going to repeat these A-folds for the other 2 spar pieces now. Last one. Oftentimes when we're using longer pieces, if you're building with a friend, it's a good idea to have an extra set of hands. If not, you can see that I just kind of wander back and forth along the whole entire piece, pushing down against the table and making sure we have a nice square cut. So our 3 main spar pieces are now done. We're going to go ahead and put those aside and we're going to weed out the cavities for our wings now. We have our servo holes removed and we have our center cavities. Now for this we're going to be doing something called a fold over, or we also call it a C fold, so it looks like a C. To do that, it's going to fold completely over using the paper basically as a nice sealed edge. This is going to give it a nice finished look but also add a tremendous amount of strength. Always make sure that you do your fold over before applying glue. Once you're happy with that, we're going to put the majority of the glue on the top surface here. A very thin bead of glue can be put down on the back surface if you wish. Make sure that you're very careful around the area because the heat's going to pass through the paper much more than it's going to pass through the foam. So don't burn yourself. Notice I'm just walking back and forth, making sure that everything stays nice and even. We're going to go ahead and fold this 180 degrees, and we're going to cut a bevel on both sides. To do a bevel, go ahead and extend your blade and hold it at an acute angle here, about 45 degrees or more, and keep your blade just on the other side of the paper. As you pull towards you, the blade will glide. So I was holding it up for the camera here. The easiest way that I prefer you to do it is using the table as your friend. Go ahead and hold this down, keeping your fingers nice and far away from the razor blade. And cut your bevel. If the foam balls up, it's time to replace your blade. Let's go ahead and do the same process on the other side of the wing. So to make room for the 2 motors for the twin engine wing here, we're going to go ahead and remove the section that you see right here. Cut all the way through this time. This area is going to be the area for our nacelles and also to give us access for our wiring. Do this process on both wings. Now that we have the access points cut for both of our nacelles, we're going to go ahead and flip the wings together, join the middle, and tape it together. Whenever we're taping, I like to go ahead and put the tape down on one side, lift up the tape edge, and then pull the 2 sides together nice and tight, and line it up, and then press it down. We're going to flip this over 180 degrees, and we're going to put a bead of glue right along the edge that you see here. Nice healthy bead, let it squeeze out just a little bit. And slowly been kind of holding on to some of these little squeegee pieces so I can go back over. Not only press the glue in, but also spread it out. Make sure this dries nice and flat for at least a minute and a half. Alright, once the glue is dry, we're going to go ahead and glue our spars down. Now I always like to do a test fit on these to make sure everything is lined up and positioned properly before gluing it down. You're going to notice that the outer panels here are going to line up directly with the servos, and that the open area is going to be facing up towards us, while the center section, the open area is going to be facing down against the actual wing. Line everything up so that your servo holes line up with each other and that your spars line up with the edges that you see here. Once you're happy with all the placement, I like to start with the center one first. We're going to focus on putting our glue right on the edge of this foam all the way. Always make sure you keep an extra hot glue stick handy so you can replace it at a moment's notice. Go ahead and place your spar down within the edge lines, making sure everything still lines up. Once the center section is glued down, go ahead and do the same process, but this time we're going to put the glue on the top surface. Notice I'm not putting any glue around the servos. Once we have the glue on, go ahead and press the outer spar with the face down against the bottom surface of the wing. We're going to repeat the exact same process on the other side. Make sure when you're lining up the spars that you line up right with the etch mark or the indicator mark. On your free plans, it'll also be shown as a blue line. So these two cavities cut out, we're going to want to be very careful the way we bend this wing to make sure we get a constant shape through the whole wing that's the same. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to kind of slowly start rocking this over, using our thumbs and our fingers to give it the defined shape that we need. Once we do that, we'll use the flats of our hands, pressing down. This is a part where it's much better to actually have a friend helping you. So a really great indicator that your wing is at the proper shape is that the top surface of your wing and the top surface of the spar are flush and against each other. Also, that the very edge crease, your fourth crease on your wing, is at the very trailing edge of your spar. Don't worry if you see little stress cracks here because your nacelles are going to cover those up. Once we're happy with that form factor, we're going to reinforce those creases, starting with the crease closest to the leading edge, and press a thin ribbon of glue right along with our crease. We're going to fold it over into shape. And we'll hold it in place for about 45 seconds. I'm going to do the next two creases together, but be careful with this one because if you press too long, it'll glue itself to the spar. Very easy way to do this is go down for a few seconds, pop it up, down for a few seconds, pop it up. Make sure that the trailing edge of your wing presses flat against the table. After about 45 seconds, you're going to see that the wing is actually maintaining its own airfoil without any additional help. Before we go any further, we're going to go ahead and do one final step. These are actually the spars that we're going to be using for the wing. Now, depending on which version you build, the spars can be configured in a couple different ways. For this, because we have no dihedral, we're going to glue our two spars on, centering it up right in the middle, like you see here. This is going to give our wing a lot of extra strength so you can carry heavier loads and it'll last longer. One side at a time, just splitting the difference, getting as close to the middle as possible. Alright, making sure that we have a good glue stick in here and plenty of extras because we're going to want to make sure we don't run out of glue. We're going to go ahead and apply a bleed of glue on the leading edge, the top of the spar, and the trailing edge. And then we're going to go ahead and hold that down for a good minute and a half. Notice that I'm jumping the areas right here and right here that are going to be exposed. For this final fold as we fold the wing over, make sure that you focus most of your pressure down on the trailing edge of the wing. Because this is such a long wing, you may notice that maybe an edge isn't fully pressed down. If that's the case, simply apply some glue, flip the wing over, and hold it down in place until it's thoroughly dry. Once our airfoil is established, let's go ahead and grab our razor blade and cut open our access holes. Alright, so our main wing is done. We're going to go ahead and build our nacelles now. So for our two nacelles, we're going to want the following pieces: our bottom plates and our top nacelles. As always, we're going to go ahead and remove the cavities and also peel some paper from some different areas. Let's go ahead and do that now. We have our top nacelles with the cavities removed, along with the foam in the front, so we have our foldovers, and the paper removed in the back so we can curl the foam. These are our top bottom plates, again with the foldovers on the sides, and these portions will mesh up with the bottom plates. We also have our mini power pods here. Now these are mini full-size power pods. They're just basically shorter. Once you have all your pieces resembling what you see here, we can move on. We have an A-fold, which means we're going to leave the side plate against the table, rotate the bottom plate up to a 90-degree angle, leaving the bottom plate underneath the side plate. Little glue on each side plate against the table, up to 90 degrees. With both of our power pods assembled, we're going to go ahead and install our firewall. When I install my firewall, I'm going to have the hole facing on the lower right if it's facing me. If it's facing away from me, lower left. Once we're happy with the fit, we're going to place a bead of glue on the very edge, and with the bottom surface of the firewall flush with the bottom surface of the power pod, we're going to press it in place. If you have any excess, you can squeegee it off. Once I push this down on the top, I like rotating to the table, getting it nice and flush with the table, and holding it in place. So once our glue is dry, we're going to use this 2-inch tape, and we're actually going to wrap this around the front of the firewall. This is very important because this is actually going to be where you get most of your strength from to hold the motor onto your power pod. Make sure you cut out the center section and the area where your wires pass through. Let's do the same process on the other power pod. So now that we have our power pods built, we're going to go ahead and install our motors. As you can see, this is our Power Pack C. Keep in mind, as our power packs and technology change, this motor may not resemble the exact motor that we're including in our Power Pack C Twin. This can also fly off of a Power Pack B, but if I was going to choose, I'd pick the C. Now for this, we also did a little bit of prep work. We installed the actual X-mount on the back with the included screws, and we also attached a front adapter using the existing silver screws, removing the plate and adding our prop adapter. A really cool tip is to take off the actual spinner from the collet and reuse that for spinners on your front of your motor. So once your motor looks like this, we're going to go ahead and snake down one wire at a time through our access holes, and then we're going to screw this into place using our wood screws. We only need to use 3 of the 4 wood screws to hold down this motor. Once we have all 3 screws in, we're going to go ahead and make sure we do a final tightening down on all 3 without stripping it out. Go ahead and do the exact same process on your other power pod. Alright, our motors are on. We're going to go ahead and put these aside and now build our nacelles. So the first thing we want to do with our main nacelles is go ahead and address this top plate here. We're going to go ahead and do our fold over by applying a thin bead of glue on all 3 portions. We're going to fold it up to a 90-degree angle, letting the excess squeeze out. After about 15 seconds, we're going to go ahead and fold it back. And what I like to do is press down and creep forward, squeezing that glue nice and thin and sealing down the paper. With our square handy, we're going to go ahead and do a B-fold. Now a B-fold is where the side plate is beside the bottom plate. We're going to keep the bottom plate firmly against the table, rotate the side plate up 90 degrees, and press firmly down towards the table. Make sure that we have no issues with our 90 degrees and that both the front and the trailing edge are firmly against the table. Once you're happy with that, we're going to go ahead and place a bead on the side of the bottom plate, starting and stopping about a ½ inch from the edge. This will be the edge right here. We're going to fold it back up to 90 degrees and then use our square to make sure it stays that way. Repeat the exact same process on the other side. Once again, starting and stopping about a ½ inch from the edge. we're going to go ahead and bend this foam open right at this hinge line that you see right here to 90 degrees. Using our thumb and forefingers, we're going to go ahead and roll this foam, copying the curve that we see on the back of our nacelle. Make sure that we roll this and mold this in a way so when we fold it down that it doesn't resist it. Once we're happy with the shape, we're going to apply a bead of glue right on that hinge line, giving it strength back, and also favoring the glue on the very sides. We're going to use the table as our friend here, and we're going to roll this back and forth, pressing in towards the foam, and also rocking back and forth, sealing the paper firmly down to the top surface of the nacelle. After we're done rocking and we lift it up, you should have a nice sealed edge all the way to the back. You're going to notice that there's excess back here. Easy way to do this is to take your razor blade or a straight edge, to hold it right at the edge that you see here, make a mark, and with that mark, cut along the line, copying the angle. The top of one nacelle is done. We're going to repeat the exact same process with the other side. With our top nacelles done, we're going to go ahead and put some glue down for our bottom nacelle and fold over just as we've done before. Same process on the front, except this time we have a shorter area because we're not going to fold it over, we're just going to seal the edge. So make your bead of glue just a little bit thinner. After about 15 seconds, just rock it away. Same process now on the other side. So at this point we have our nacelles done, we have our wing. We're going to go ahead and concentrate a little bit on the electronics. We have our two 30 amp ESCs that go along with our Power Pack C and also our Power Y connector. If you don't have one of these, I strongly recommend you get one. We're going to go ahead and snake this through the bottom so the XT60s on both sides of the wing pop out. Now we're going to go ahead and make our connection, and just for a little added security, I'm going to wrap it with a piece of tape. We're also going to go ahead and connect our extensions for our servo leads. Never hurts to tape this as well. Make sure that your signal wires and your ground wires match up. Once we have our extensions connected and taped down, we can go ahead and pass them through and fish them through the rear center hole. Once we got both the Power Y and the servo extension right where they need to be, I'm going to go ahead and feed these down in, pulling both the extension and the power cable to the point where the ESC faces just like you see here. This is going to give us enough room to make our connections, but at the same time, we can fasten this down so it gets as much airflow as possible. Just going to take a little drop of glue and then fasten this in place. We're going to do the exact same process now on the other side of the wing. You're going to see here that all of our motor-related electronics are going to be passing out of this rear hole. This is going to make assembly and hooking up to the electronics much easier. We're now ready to go ahead and move on and put our nacelles on. So you may need to do a little bit of trimming to make this get the perfect fit. We're going to go ahead and take our nacelle and we're going to fit it down into place. If everything's trimmed right, you should see the trailing edge being able to be nice and flush, and then the sides of the wings meeting up nice and tight against the nacelle. Now make sure this isn't too tight or it's going to be very difficult to get your power pod and your bottom plate on. It's okay if you have about an 1/8 inch relief right in the front that you see here. That's going to get covered up by the bottom plate. And speaking of the bottom plate, before we glue anything on, let's just give this a quick test fit to make sure we're happy with it. Now that we know everything fits, we can go ahead and remove this bottom plate and glue our top nacelle in place. We're going to go ahead and focus glue on the very bottom surface, second back from the leading edge. All the way back to the back. Same process as before, we'll flip it over, slide it down in, and hold it in place. Notice I'm lifting up the front edge of the nacelle just a little bit to make sure that it doesn't actually push the nacelle up. We want a nice firm seat against the bottom surface of the wing. After glue is fully dried, we can go back and we can trace this outer edge with a thin bead of hot glue on both sides. Then we come back and remove the excess with a piece of scrap foam. Same process on the other side. Let's go ahead and make our connections for our ESCs. This is going to be a little bit easier without the bottom plate on. So before we press these all the way back in, we want to make sure that they spin the right direction. Generally with twin engines, you have one prop rotating counterclockwise and one running clockwise. We're going to go ahead and run the right side counterclockwise and the left side is clockwise. Very easy way to test out the motors is by using a simple servo tester. Now make sure that whenever you're doing this, you don't apply voltage to your actual servo tester, but you apply voltage to the battery pack, because this has an internal BEC which will power this up. For this motor on our right hand side, we want it to go ahead and turn counterclockwise. And it does. For this motor, we want it to turn clockwise. Believe it or not, they both work perfectly just this way. So we're ready to go ahead and push the power pods the rest of the way back and put on our bottom plate. If we have to rotate the direction and make it go the other way, all we need to do is take 2 of the 3 leads and swap them. So our next step is just to rock these gently and press it all the way to where the firewall meets the leading edge of the wing. If you're using a B motor, make sure you don't push these too far back. Allow the props to have enough clearance in front of the nacelles. One last quick test fit. Then we're going to apply a nice healthy bead of glue on the back. And then also each pocket. Notice I'm not putting any glue on the center section right here. Just to get a nice flat surface all the way across, we can press it down on the table, and also I'm using my 2 fingers to press in towards the bottom plate. Give it about 45 seconds and repeat the same process on the other side. Our 2 nacelles are now installed. We're ready to move on to our next step, which is putting in the aileron servos and cutting the ailerons out. The first thing we want to do is center up our servos. Now make sure you use the control arms that look just like you see here. When you mount them, our servos come pre-centered, so as long as you don't move them, they should be just fine. To make the signal wires long enough, we're going to go ahead and install our extensions that are included with our Power Pack C Twin. It's a good idea whenever you're installing your servos to always tape those connections so that way they don't pull apart. We want our aileron servo arm to be as close as possible to the hinge line. So we're going to go ahead and pick this servo that you see here and install it. All we simply need to do is to guide the wire through all the way to the center section. A really easy tip is to bend the hook just like we did on our fuselage out of our extra push rod material and snag it and pull it through. If you hear some tape ripping in the background, that's my wonderful wife actually shipping out the FT Legacies now to all the great people that actually supported the crowdfund. Cut all the way through the aileron that you see right here. Next we're going to drag our knife through and finish off the hinge line and open it up. Bend the aileron over 180 degrees and cut a single bevel. Make sure you have no problem deflecting it either way. A real easy trick here to keep these from rubbing is take your push rod wire and rub it back and forth a couple times. To add strength to the hinge line, we're going to go ahead and reinforce the hinge just the same way we did on our elevator and our rudder. Then bead of glue right down the paper. Wipe off the excess. Make sure this is thoroughly dried before closing it. Take a control horn that is included in the kit and press it down into your aileron. Next we're going to guide our push rod wire from the outside of the wing pointing towards the center. We can actually just remove the control horn like you see here. We're going to line up our push rod with the 3rd hole from the control horn. It's the furthest out. And we're going to mark it with our thumb. With a pair of pliers we can bend this 90 degrees down and 90 degrees over. Because nothing's glued down, we can guide this through and press it in. We want to make sure that the trailing edge of the aileron and the wing line up perfectly. Once you're happy with that and making sure that the holes are directly over your hinge line, you can glue everything down in place. It's one connection. We'll just lift this up slightly, 2 little drops of glue, and press it down. Make sure you take plenty of time to make sure these joints are very strong. If the joints aren't strong, you'll lose control. Our one aileron is done. We're going to do the exact same process now on the other side of the wing. Alright, so our ailerons are now done. We're going to go ahead and move on to showing how to put the optional split flaps on. You're going to notice that we're showing these steps on the wing that does not have the twin engines on it, but it's the exact same process. Keep in mind, with the optional flaps, you may need to have a receiver that holds more than 6 channels. Alright, so for our flaps option, once again, this does not have to be done to have a great flying experience. You can do flap-arounds. We're going to go ahead and situate both of our servos centered up as you see here. You're going to notice that both of our servos actually have the servo arms going in the exact same direction. We want that to be the case in this time. Now be prepared to adjust your servos based on the type of transmitter you have and also the throws that you're wishing it to get. For me, I don't like a lot of extreme throw, so I'm going to go ahead and put them right in the middle. Just like before, I'm going to go ahead and straighten out my servo lead, and I'm going to carefully guide it through to the center section. We'll go and press this place down. You're going to notice that this servo actually sits on the surface, and that's exactly how we want it. And it's going to also be in a line with our other servo arms. Go ahead and put both servos in. Alright, so you can see these 2 shorter leads are going to be our servo leads for the flaps. The 2 longer leads are going to be our servo leads for the ailerons. Remove the excess foam on this edge that you see. We're going to take a simple piece of tape the same length that we have and tape it down. You can go ahead and just cut off any excess that you may have. I'm going to kind of lift this up, and I'm going to go just about to the surface, but we want to make sure that the aileron doesn't rub, so just about a 1/16 of an inch on the inside, and then pull them tight against the trailing edge, press the tape down, and firmly adhere it. Now we can fold this over 180 degrees. At this point, we can open this up like a door, and you have 2 different options. You can use hot glue, or you can use instant glue if you wish. I'm just going to go ahead and put a little bead of instant glue. Now I'm going to flip this over, and we're going to run our fingers back and forth, making sure it's nice and glued. Give this about 3 minutes to thoroughly dry. Alright, just for a little added strength here, we can either use tape or we can go ahead and go back with some hot glue. Put a bead right over that seam. Alright, we have one flap done. We're going to go ahead and grab a control horn and get our push rods, and we're going to link it up. Alright, you're going to notice that our actual control horn is set way far back from where it typically would be, and that's so when we actually pull this forward, it gives it plenty of deflection to give you a nice, basically Fowler flap or a flap that you see here. You don't need a lot of movement to get a lot of deflection, but also you can get a full 90 degrees. Now if you really want to get extreme and you drop this to 90 degrees, it will stop the plane almost dead in its tracks, but also be prepared for a lot of lost lift. Alright, it's just like the ailerons here. We're going to pass this through, and we're going to go to the outermost hole that you see on the control horn. Now to keep this as close as possible to the fuselage, we can go ahead and actually bend this up, and then over 90 degrees. What we're looking for now is we're looking for a nice tight joint up against here, and we can adjust with our servo sub trims, and when this deflects forward, you're going to notice that you're going to have the perfect amount of deflection for a nice flap. Once you're happy with the way everything looks, we'll first start with getting our control horn down, let it dry for 45 seconds. Once our control horns are down, a couple little drops is all you need, and drop it into place. 45 seconds and we're ready to do the other side. Now that our ailerons are done and possibly even the optional split flaps, I'm going to go ahead and just install this little popsicle stick here. It's not something that's needed to be done, but as the rubber bands go over top, it'll give it a little bit of added bracing. So our wing is now done. We're ready to install it in the fuselage and hook up our gear and ultimately go fly. Alright, so we're ready to go ahead and start making our connections. The first thing we want to do is we want to get our barbecue skewers to make our wing hold downs here. We're going to go ahead and pop through the holes on each side. We're not going to try to pass this through. We want to just simply poke through one side, poke through the other, and then connect the dots. I like to leave about a ½ inch on each side. While we're at it, we can even go ahead and address our front hatch here. For this one, I'm just going to leave about an 1/8 inch on each side. So inside here we have our bomb bay, and we have our rudder and our elevator. We're going to go ahead and hook that up to our receiver now. I'm going to go ahead and use our AR610 receiver here, and I'm going to go ahead and connect the elevator to the elevator port and the rudder to the rudder port. We're going to line up the signal to signal. Alright, for this setup here, instead of installing the optional flaps, I'm actually making flaperons. This is a really great solution, and you can actually just split your ailerons into 2 separate channels. All you simply need to do is select flaperon in your wing setting. Since we're using flaperons, we're going to plug our ailerons into 2 different channels. If you're using ailerons normally, you can wire this together and just simply plug it into the aileron port. We're going to go into our aux 1, and the next one will go into aileron. Easy way to tell is to switch over to monitor and to see what channels move when you move your sticks. Next, we're going to go ahead and connect our motors. To connect our motors, if you don't want to use differential thrust, you can wire the signals together and you can plug it in your throttle port. If you plan on using differential thrust, we're going to connect one channel into gear and the other channel into throttle. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to plug in my bomb bay using the 610, but I can access that later. I'm going to stick a little piece of Velcro right down here inside, and that way I can take my receiver and stick it in. That way we have one antenna actually pointing sideways and one pointing straight down. Take your power lead and fish it towards the front of the nose. I'm going to go ahead and just hold this down with a rubber band really quick, but I can always go ahead and re-access this if I plugged anything in wrong. So we're going to go and test out all of our connections and make sure our throws and our sub trims are all dialed in. First thing we want to do is make sure, of course, the props are off, transmitter's on. Now if we hooked everything up right, we should be able to have right aileron where the right aileron goes up when we push right. Left, obviously, left aileron goes up. When we pull back on the stick, our elevator should go up. Push forward goes down. And when we give left rudder, we have left rudder. And when we give right rudder, we have right rudder. So this here is our throw gauge. On the one side we have the low throws, and on the other side we have the high throws. Because this is probably more advanced throw, you can use your dual rates to get both low and high to have different flying styles as you're flying through the air. With high, if you hooked up everything according to how he said, it should automatically be that way out of the box. Then all you simply need to do is go into your dual rates and adjust it for low. Generally that's going to be about 70% dual rate. While you're in your dual rates, go ahead and dial in about 30% expo to get a really nice smooth center stick. Now that everything's dialed in, we're going to go ahead and check the rotation of our motors. Alright. So this prop is going to go on this motor because it spins outward, and this prop will be on this motor. Now that everything's centered up and our throws are right, we don't need the power anymore, and we can install our props. And while we're working around the motors, we might as well lock them into place. We're going to use our barbecue skewer and pop it through the exact same way we did our hatch. We'll go through each hole on each side and then pass it through. That's one down. Let's go ahead and do the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and add 2 additional rubber bands here now that everything's hooked up properly. And then we're going to go ahead and install our Velcro for our battery so we can establish the proper CG with where we place our battery in the nose. So on the bottom of the surface of the wing, you're going to notice that there's 2 holes. These are going to be your balance holes. This plane can fly beautifully off of a 2200 to 3000 3-cell or 4-cell battery. It's where you place it in the actual cockpit that's going to depict your balance. We're going to cut the included Velcro that we have here that's fuzzy and install it into the fuselage. Next, we're going to go ahead and install our battery. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and fly this with a 4-cell 2800 Hyperion battery. Make sure that you don't fly this with more than a 9-inch prop or you may overheat your ESCs. I'm going to slide this in, and right about half and half, right where the cockpit is a really magic spot for this. I'm going to put my hands on the 2 dots, and what I'm looking for is for it to bounce just slightly nose down. Just like that. When you fly different batteries, you can make a mark once you're happy with the flight characteristic on each battery, and then just write with a marker what size battery that is. That way when you place it, you're always going back to the same mark. So at this point, our plane is balanced. All we need to do is make our connections with the battery, put our hatch on, we're ready to go take it out for its maiden flight. All right, so our FT Legacy twin engine version is all ready to fly. A couple things, if you've never made an airplane before, we have a great video called 6 Quick Tips for a Successful First Flight. Check that out. It's gonna talk about throttle settings, launching, into the wind, battery levels, etc. So this is all checked out. We're ready to go. Let's put her in the air. Without the split flaps, you drop the flaperons, it'll slow down beautifully for you. Friends, I want to thank you for being part of the Flight Test family. Also, thank you for making the dream of Edgewater Air Park a reality. My hope is that I not only get to show every single one of you guys watching someday this land, but also that you get to show your kids and make future memories on it. Thank you again for making this dream possible and also bringing the FT Legacy to life. We'll see you next time.